Throughout this book, I will be posing some tough questions and putting forward some alternative thoughts on how things should be when it comes to combating suicide and domestic violence. I want this book to make people uncomfortable because most people don't have a clue when it comes to making their own decisions. When you blame someone else or refer to yourself as a victim, you are giving away your power and handing it to another person. Victim mentality is keeping you stuck. All it is doing is giving you a get out of jail card when you need to make excuses for why your life is so messed up. At the end of the day, it's all a matter of perception. Life and everything that happens to you is neither good nor bad, but rather how we perceive it to be. As the lead character of one of my screenplays is told, the way you frame something can make a huge difference to how it looks. When Brianna Robinson died in 2013, I never imagined that I'd write 2 books even remotely related to her story. But that's what happens when you stop calling yourself a victim and start using events as life happening for you, not to you. What if? I want to start this part of the book with 2 words, what and if. These 2 words may not seem special, but if used in the right way, they can change your life. Tony Robbins used these words to flip our thinking around in his Day with Destiny 2016 promotional video on YouTube. The video got me wondering if I could create a similar concept to flip the narrative on how people see their circumstances. Here's what I jotted down. What if we had the power to create the life we wanted? What if we were responsible for how others treated us? What if we were the only reason we succeeded or failed? What if we somehow attracted everything that has happened in our life? What if we stopped using excuses and stopped blaming others? What if nothing was our fault, but everything was our responsibility? And most importantly, what if all of this was actually true? Would you do things differently? Would you be more careful with what you attract? Would you choose more wisely when making decisions in all areas of your life? If we can grasp the concept that in some way we are responsible for everything that happens to us, then we have the power to attract anything we want in our lives. No matter what happens, no one is to blame for your failures and no one deserves the credit for your successes, except you. Almost every day since Brianna took her life, I've asked myself, what makes someone want to commit suicide? I've come to believe that a person decides to take their own life when they feel that there is no other alternative. My great mentor, Dr. John DeMartini, suggests that this feeling of hopelessness comes when a person's fantasy of what their life should look like doesn't match the reality of what their life is. If what Dr. DeMartini says is true, then those 2 words that Tony Robbins so eloquently used are applied in this situation, then we may have something very powerful in combating suicide and depression. The words what and if are incredibly powerful because they give hope. The hope of something better. The hope of a way out. The hope of life beyond pain and struggle. Hope is what people suffering from depression are missing. Give yourself or someone you know the gift of hope by sharing these 2 simple yet powerful words and see what a difference it makes to their life or yours. The Hero's Journey, Part 1. We all think of a hero as someone that is perfect, but in fact, a hero is not really a hero unless they are flawed. It is those flaws that drive the hero to greatness, and it is their greatest challenges that take the most courage but offer the most satisfaction too. The true definition of a hero is someone who overcomes insurmountable odds, putting themselves and their safety secondary to the needs and well-being of others. Other than a flawed hero, the most important element to any successful movie is a strong villain. There aren't too many box office hits that don't have a villain, and a strong one at that. Forrest Gump, 50 First Dates and Finding Nemo are the exception to the rule. The villain is crucial to driving the plot forward. They are also important for the hero to realise their potential. Without a strong nemesis, our hero can't grow. It goes without saying that most antagonists are flawed. That is why they are the villain. Almost every great movie villain thinks that they are acting for the greater good of the world. Take, for example, Shooter McGavin in Happy Gilmore. He believes in his heart that he is protecting the integrity of the golfing fraternity by stopping Happy Gilmore from being successful. All of his actions are driven by his belief, and it is this that allows us to empathise with him, despite how he is conducting himself. This applies to every great villain. Deep down, they believe they are doing the right thing. Brianna's auntie is no different. And believe it or not, I respect the fact that she believes that what she is doing is for the greater good. This has led her to act in a less than honourable way on many occasions over the past decade, just like all good villains do. Having said that, I am very thankful to have faced such a nemesis. Her actions and behaviour have forced me to take stock of my life and grow beyond anything I dreamt possible. As much as it pains me to be too complimentary about a woman who has acted in quite a disturbing way, I am thankful for having had a nemesis with as much conviction as Brianna's auntie. While most of what she has done, alleged or sought was ill-informed, her tenacity and determination are to be applauded. Because of her actions, I am much stronger, wiser, content, and most of all, happier than I've ever been. Everyone is on a hero's journey, whether you realise it or not. Think of each event that happens in your life, just like a hero would in a movie. If you want to know how to become a better person, embrace challenges and opponents. They are brought into your life to help you become your own hero and achieve the dreams you have in life. The Hero's Journey, Part 2. The most profound example of the hero's journey in movies is in The Wizard of Oz. To most, the story of Dorothy's journey is simply a cute, colourful and incredibly imaginative story. While this is certainly the case, as Oprah writes in her book The Path Made Clear, this movie is one of the greatest spiritual journeys of all time. To paraphrase Oprah, the yellow brick road represented the path for Dorothy to find her true self. Along the yellow brick road, Dorothy was confronted with the disempowered parts of her personality. So when you look deeper, Dorothy was not happy with the life she had and went searching for a better place. Along the way, she was shown traits that she believed she lacked in the form of her friends that she met along the path: courage, intelligence, a heart, etc. In order to find her way, she needed to follow her path, the yellow brick road, to find her way home, back to her true self. The Wicked Witch symbolised Dorothy's inner demons trying to keep her held back from her true self. The witch kept popping up when Dorothy seemed to be getting on top of things. Dorothy having to kill the Wicked Witch in order to realise her dream was brilliantly symbolic of how we must kill the part of our mind that constantly tells us that we're not good enough. The yellow brick road is a metaphor for our true calling. We often get pushed off track by distractions in life, but if we stick to the path, the yellow brick road, then we will reach our destiny or destination. Just like Dorothy, we often search for some sort of force outside of us, like the Wizard of Oz, to show us the way. What Dorothy discovered when explained to her by Glinda was that she already had those traits. She just needed to find them for herself. This was beautifully tied together at the end of the movie when Dorothy said, "If I ever go looking for my heart's desire, I won't look any further than my own backyard, because if it isn't there, then I never really lost it to begin with." This is the classic full circle of the hero's journey, where the hero realises that what they searched for externally was always there on the inside. And this was captured perfectly with the line, "There's no place like home." The Real Secret. One of the greatest lessons that I ever learnt came when I discovered how the law of attraction really worked. While Rhonda Byrne did a fantastic job of bringing The Secret to the attention of the masses, most of what the law of attraction is really about was left out. To fully understand how the law of attraction works, you must go a lot deeper. The most important thing that I learnt from the teachings of Abram was that we are responsible in some way for everything that is in our lives. Unless you're willing to be brutally honest with yourself, you will never be able to grasp this concept. You will continue to make excuses and blame other people and circumstances. Let's be clear, there is a difference between something being your fault and it being your responsibility. I am not suggesting that bad things that happen in your life are your fault. I am, however, saying that you are responsible in some way for them being a part of your life. please suspend your judgment while I explain. A woman is entitled to wear provocative clothing and walk down a dark alley at night, but that doesn't mean that nothing bad is going to happen to her. It's not her fault if someone attacks her, but that doesn't negate her responsibility in the situation or the ability for her to avoid it. She can't control what another person might do, but she can take steps to avoid it happening. That is the difference between something being your fault and it being your responsibility. The only three things we can control in life are our thoughts, our actions, and our perceptions. We can't control how people act, but we can take responsibility for how we act, what we do, and how we place ourselves in these situations. In the teachings of Abram, Esther and Jerry Hicks talk about co-creating. This is where we create with other people. For example, if you have a car accident, you have co-created this with the other driver. The accident would not have happened if both parties were not there at that exact moment. When you bump into someone who becomes your soulmate, this is also co-creating. The event that led to your meeting would not have occurred if you were both not present. Whether you want to accept it or not, the same must be said for domestic violence. At some point in every relationship, we have all co-created elements that have led to domestic violence. Deny it if you wish, but I promise, all you will do is repeat the same steps until you grasp this concept and intentionally co-create instead of unintentionally. We all love to take credit for the good things in our lives, but quickly blame others or circumstances for the bad. The truth is that we are responsible for all of it. Once you understand this, then it is you who has the power to create only the things that you want and avoid the things you don't. Being right versus being happy. God gave us 2 eyes, 2 ears and 2 nostrils, but only 1 mouth. I believe that this means that He intended for us to look, listen and breathe twice as much as we speak. For most people these days, it's the exact opposite. No one ever got in trouble by listening, looking or breathing, but everybody has landed themselves in a bad situation by speaking, me included. You learn very little by speaking, but you learn a lot by listening. There's a consensus that everyone has the right to speak their mind, and while this may be true, it doesn't mean we have to activate this right to be happy. And in many cases, people would rather be right than be happy. As previously stated in other parts of the book, it's a woman's right to dress how she pleases without fear or reprise by men. But it is still smarter to do so cautiously, because at the end of the day, if something terrible happens to you, then it is you who suffers the most. If I really wanted, I could pursue the media or Brianna's family for blatant defamation, abuse and harassment, or the police for wrongful imprisonment. But do I really want to put myself through that just because I want to be right? I'm not saying any of these things won't happen, but I would much rather be happy than be right. The need to always be right causes conflict and anguish in our lives and leads to anger and frustrations, and in turn, illness and disease. This doesn't mean that I concede or give in to everyone. It simply means that I don't feel the need to push my point or my opinion and be right to feel better about myself. This is where most couples fail and relationships break down, my previous relationships included. We would rather get our point across and be right during an argument than be happy. It really doesn't matter who's right or wrong. In fact, both people could be right or wrong, and neither one would concede or be happy. There is nothing wrong with saying sorry regardless of who is right. Sorry doesn't mean you're conceding or wrong. It simply means that your partner's happiness is more important to you than whatever it is you're arguing about, which in most cases is not important. Not long after Facebook took off, a friend of mine said to me, "You should never be friends on Facebook with anyone who you would not invite into your own home. You'd never let someone into your home if all they were going to do is abuse you or harm you emotionally or physically. So why would you give them the same opportunities online? Surround yourself with only those who are good for your mental health. Everyone has the right to express their opinion, but more importantly, you have the right to feel safe and not be attacked or defamed. People who say horrible things online would never have the guts to say the same things to your face. I know this for a fact. For all the thousands of hateful comments and threats leveled at me online, not one person has said a single thing to my face. Once you realise that the people who attack you online are nothing more than gutless, insecure people, you realise that they are of no real harm to you. Lessons from Ed Shearin. If it floats, flies, feeds or fucks, it's not a good investment. My dad. Okay, so I added the fucks part because Dad would never have said that. Regardless, the rest was great advice from a man who knew the difference between a good and a bad investment. When the Gold Coast was a small town in the 1980s, Dad was everyone's accountant. I've lost count of how many times older people have seen my name and said, "You must be Ed Sheeran's son." Yep, that's right. My dad was Ed Sheerin. It usually gets a laugh when I say I'm related to Ed Sheerin, but growing up, I never knew how good Dad was when it came to investments. We lived in a gorgeous house perched high up on the exclusive Skyline Terrace at West Burleigh. But even so, everything else about Dad was low-key. It wasn't until after his death that I became qualified in the financial industry, and to be honest, one huge regret of mine was that I didn't discover my love for investing before his passing. These days, I often look at companies and investments and wish I could pick his brains about them or how to evaluate them better. We all want to have more money at the end of our life, rather than more life at the end of our money, and he achieved this, despite living until the age of 91. Apart from financial advice, Dad imparted very little advice about anything else unless you asked. He was a man of very few words, but when he did speak, you listened. Despite this, you could learn a lot from him by his actions rather than his words. He read and exercised every day without fail. He only spoke when asked, and only if he had something to add to a conversation. And he rarely spoke ill of anyone either. These are all lessons that I've not always been great at, but of which I want to emphasise are important to a truly happy life. Jim Rohn, who was Tony Robbins' mentor, said, "Formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a life." As I've stated previously, I read at least 3 hours a day and spend an additional hour or two listening to podcasts. I also read a lot of movie scripts, which is an essential part of developing as a screenwriter in Hollywood. In a world where everyone thinks they should be voicing their opinion, I try to refrain from doing so unless I have something that can help others. So in summary, nourish your mind and body daily. Speak only when you need to and not when you think you have to, and don't say anything to anyone else that you wouldn't say to yourself. If you follow these simple tips, you too could have a long and happy life like my dad did. And as for the quote at the beginning of the story, don't invest in boats, animals or airlines. They're endless money pits. Loving Thyself, a journey within. I think we can all relate to searching for something outside of ourselves. Just like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. We want wealth, love, possessions, all in the hope that it brings us eternal happiness. But in my experience, lasting joy isn't an external thing. It begins from within. For years I believed my happiness depended on others, especially romantic partners. When they didn't meet my expectations, I felt hurt and betrayed. It took me a long time to realise that while a partner can enrich your life, they cannot be the main source of your joy. That responsibility lies with you. The pivotal shift came when I stopped trying to control external factors, situations, people, and even the media, which had caused me immense pain. None of it worked. Peace arrived only when I let go of external battles and turned inward. As psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl once said, "When we are unable to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." A profound truth emerged during my journey when I discovered that self-love is not a luxury, it's essential. Without it, you cannot truly love others and accept their love in return. When I first decided to go relationship-free, I felt like I was punishing myself, but over time I discovered the power of enjoying my own company. Gradually I stopped seeking validation from others and began to love myself. The cliched wisdom that true love comes from within began to ring true. Once you love yourself, you no longer need someone else to complete you and are less likely to attract any type of domestic violence in your life. Instead, you find joy in someone who complements you. There's a beautiful quote in the book The Fight to Flourish by Jenny Lusko, when referring to the tragic loss of her 5-year-old daughter Lenya in 2012, which read, "If I had my life to live over again, I would find you sooner so that I could love you longer." When I read this quote, I first thought that I wished that I had met Brianna sooner so that I could have loved her longer. But my immediate thought after that was of an inward reflection. While the fact that I have now found myself is a wonderful gift, I wish that I had found myself sooner so that I could have loved myself longer. It's a subtle spin on this beautiful quote, but one that I hope resonates with you. My wish for anyone reading this book is that you find yourself sooner so that you can love yourself longer. not all gifts can be taken back. As Buddha once said after receiving negativity from one of his critics, if someone offers you a gift and you don't accept it, to whom does the gift belong? In my opinion, it returns to the person who is trying to give it to you. If someone offers you the gift of hateful words or actions, don't accept it. That way, it will not only have little effect on you, but it will remain with them. For years, Brianna's family have tried their best to bully, harass, and project anger my way. But because I have never accepted it, it sits with them. They own it. They're carrying all of these feelings around, and it's them who are suffering, not me. I'm not affected by their anger, only they are. It's like Tony Robbins always says, hating someone is like drinking poison and expecting them to die. If the people who live their lives with so much hate knew anything about how cancer is allowed to develop and survive in our bodies, they would not be holding on to such hate and venom. They're creating the perfect acidic environment in their bodies for cancer and diseases to thrive. Why would anyone do that to themselves? The same goes for media and online trolls. For either of them to affect me, 3 things have to occur. 1, I have to turn on the news or go on social media, which I rarely do. 2, I have to read or listen to what they say, which I won't. And 3, I have to let what is said affect me, which will never happen. If you've noticed, in all 3 cases, for anything to affect me, it comes down to my actions, not the actions of someone else. Whether we're talking about suicide, bullying, or domestic violence, it comes down to how you react to anything that happens in life. It doesn't matter what anyone says or does. It only matters how you react to what someone says or does that counts. Fellas, it doesn't matter if your partner spends all your money, won't give you sex, nags you constantly, or belittles you in front of your friends or children. It only matters how you react. Whether someone is harassing you at work, bullying you online or at school, or showing anger towards you in a relationship, these things can only hurt you if you let them. As the famous quote says, all the water in all the oceans cannot sink a ship unless you let the water in. In the case of domestic violence, if you don't accept these gifts from your partner from the beginning, then it won't get to the level of physical or emotional abuse that we see in many cases. It's only when you don't love yourself that someone else can hurt you. If you truly love yourself, then there is no way you would tolerate anything less than complete love from someone else. No ifs or buts, this is fact. How do I know? I've done it myself. I've been in relationships where I didn't love myself and I spent the entire time letting them treat me badly. I was so desperate to be loved that I would turn a blind eye to how badly they were treating me. Why would I do that, you ask? Because subconsciously, we prefer bad love to the feeling of having no love at all. Positive versus negative. One of the more difficult things I've had to deal with is at the core of mental illness, negative thoughts. Even though I've always professed to be one of the most optimistic people around, at times I too have struggled with this. Many gurus like to preach that you should eliminate negative thoughts, but as I've learnt, these thoughts can be useful. The first step is to identify the negative thought and establish if there is something you need to act on. If there is real danger, then see it as a blessing. In many cases, the thought enables us to protect ourselves from a situation or safeguard us before disasters hit. If it's just a useless thought, then it's simply a matter of saying, piss off, I won't let you stay here in my mind. The only problem is that if this is all you do, then you'll have another negative thought take its place soon after. The key is to replace the useless negative thought with a more positive one, or one that will serve you better. As Tony Robbins teaches, you have to stand guard at the gateway of your mind. If your initial negative thought is, I'm fat, you might replace it with, I'm working towards my ultimate body. Notice I didn't say replace it with, I'm fit and fabulous with an awesome body. Our mind knows a lie and will call bullshit, unless it is the case that you have an awesome body. If you're overweight and you say, I'm fit as the replacement thought, your mind will fire back with, nah, you're fat. At which time you will more than likely agree and feel even more depressed. You want to replace the negative thought with a slightly more positive one, but not a lie. It's kind of like a compromise. If your initial negative thought is, I'm always broke, don't say I have lots of money, but instead try something like, I will find a way to earn more money. Once you say, I will find a way to earn more money, your mind will automatically take that as a challenge to go looking for opportunities to earn more money using your reticular activating system. Don't believe me? Try it. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with negative thoughts. Don't just dismiss them and pretend that everything's rainbows and unicorns, because they will come back and bite you in the ass. Hear the thought, identify its validity or usefulness, then deal with it or squash it and replace it with a more useful one. But rather than calling them negative or positive thoughts, I like to refer to them as empowering or disempowering. If you can catch yourself when you think disempowering thoughts, quickly replace them with empowering ones. It becomes a little game, and before you know it, your mind starts to do it automatically.
Never trust the mainstream media. Part 1. As Kevin Bloody Wilson sung when referring to journalism in 1985,
"Half of what you read is bull and the other half's all shit."
I've known this fact long before my case was thrust into the spotlight. But despite that, I still agreed to sit down with Channel 7 in 2018 with the slimeball Denham Hitchcock to tell what he claimed was my side of the story in relation to Brianna's death. Before I continue, I must explain my name calling of the former journalist. You see, as part of my committal hearing in 2021, my barrister obtained all of the footage from Channel 7 as part of our defence. While it was disturbing to watch Denham coerce the other interviewees, what I found most interesting was despite the fact that he was trying to portray me as some sort of predator, he was caught on camera by his own crew sleazing onto Brianna's cousin less than a week after proposing to his now wife. Now, I wasn't too bothered about the hatchet job Channel 7 did that night. The media are very quick to defame someone but extremely slow to apologise or make amends. They did the same thing to Lindy Chamberlain in the early 80s, and it wasn't until recently that it was even remotely corrected. The man who did most of the damage to Lindy's reputation was actually Denham's father, Kevin Hitchcock. It took Kevin more than 3 decades to apologise to Lindy for the way he portrayed her during his time as a journalist. Let's see how long it takes for his son to realise that he too was wrong in the way he tried to portray me as a murderer in his misleading Sunday night story. Whether that apology shows up or not, one thing's for certain. The Hitchcock name has a long history of misleading the public for the sake of a headline. Unfortunately for them, in both cases, their targets, Lindy and myself, have benefited by becoming stronger people as a result of the Hitchcock slander. The clues of both Kevin and Denham's deceit actually sit in the surname, Hitchcock. Hitch means to move something to a different position with a jerk. In other words, to manipulate something, such as someone's opinion, to a different place than where it originally was. And cock? Well, enough said. I don't blame journalists for their stupidity. Most are trying to pander to the dictators that they work for and are too spineless to stand up for what they know is the truth. They sell out for a paycheck instead of showing any amount of responsibility that should come with the level of power that they've been given in their job. To some degree, I feel sorry for them. They're being manipulated and are too weak to stand up to the biggest bullies of all, media barons. The day Rupert Murdoch and others like him leave this earth will be the best day for humanity since Saddam Hussein or Adolf Hitler died.
Never trust the mainstream media, Part 2. One of the worst cases of misleading journalism came at the very beginning of my story making headlines. It came from a rookie journalist from the paper called the Gold Coast Bullshittin' named Megan Wames. 18 months after Brianna's death, I was in court to answer a charge of using a carriage service to menace, harass or offend. In other words, sending an offensive text message. Thanks to the incompetence of the police investigating the case, they gave my phone, which I bought for Brianna and which was in my name, back to Brianna's mother. She then started moaning about some messages on the phone and subsequently I was charged. In hindsight, perhaps I should have complained about some of the horrible messages Brie's mum sent to her prior to her death. As Megan Wames sat right behind me in court, the prosecution explained that they had a list of 1,550 text messages that Brie and I sent to each other over a period of 3 months. That's about 8 messages each per day. Of those 1,550 messages, the prosecution believed that less than 7 were deemed to be offensive. That's less than 1%. Incidentally, the other 1,540 plus messages were extremely loving. Now I concede that even one offensive message is too many, but let's be clear here, Brie didn't find them offensive. Despite this, the morning after my initial hearing, the front page of the Gold Coast Bullshittin', hang on, do I keep mispronouncing that? Anyway, the headline read, "He bombarded her with 1,550 abusive text messages minutes before her death." That's a massive difference between the truth and what was printed.
Of course, the media as a whole don't have a thinking brain between them, so several media outlets took that headline and parroted it around the world without a single ounce of fact-checking before defaming me. The worst part was that due to this overinflated media hype surrounding the case after this misleading headline, when I pleaded guilty to one charge of sending an offensive text message, the magistrate jailed me for 6 months. This was despite the maximum penalty for similar offences provided to that judge by both the defence and prosecution was only a $300 fine and no conviction. Thankfully, on appeal 10 days later, I won and this was overturned. By the way, the only reason I pleaded guilty in the first place was to not put Brianna's family through any more grief. What a considerate idiot I was. That said, I must stress that I do not believe that we should talk to each other in a way that is even remotely offensive. As for the former journalist Megan Wames, it's disturbing to know that she is now a school teacher and allowed to influence the next generation with her lack of morals. As for the two-bit poor excuse for a newspaper she used to work for, it has more resemblance to a tacky Jerry Harvey catalogue than a reputable newspaper these days, so no one takes them too seriously. Live your best life, not someone else's. After finishing school, I worked as a session rapper for some famous international pop stars and came so close to being signed to record labels on several occasions. But by the age of 22, I'd begun looking for a real job. This goal was expedited when my girlfriend fell pregnant. At the time, I thought that I'd better get a stable job and be a responsible father, despite my gut telling me that this was not the life I was destined to live. I felt that trying to make it work was the right thing to do, but given the way things turned out, and in particular how she turned out, it was a lesson learnt and one that I would never make again. My mistake was that I put someone else's needs before my own. Sure, it's a noble thing to do, but in reality, if I wasn't going to look after myself, then who was? While I'm not suggesting you should be self-centred, you need to take care of number one. Society wants us to conform to the way of life that it says is best for us. The media claim that in order to call yourself successful, you must get a good education, a stable job, get married, have children, pay as much taxes as the government needs, buy a home, don't take risks and live what I now know as an average life. While none of these things are bad, it doesn't mean you're a bad person if you take a different path. For example, in the finance section of my book, The No BS Approach to Create the Life You Want, I explain that you would be far wealthier if you put the same amount of money into other investments rather than a mortgage over 30 years. Sure, house prices may have doubled in the last 30 years, but so is the amount you end up paying when you calculate interest. Again, this isn't the best option for everyone, but in my opinion, it's a far better investment than the alternative. When it comes to getting married and starting a family, if this is what you want, then great. But as it turns out for me, I am far happier having never been married. So far as the security of a full-time job, that myth was blown out of the water when COVID hit. The biggest problem was that those who thought their job was secure failed to have 6 months' worth of savings to tide them over when the pandemic hit because they thought their jobs were safe. My point is that you don't have to live a conventional life to be happy or successful. There is nothing wrong with not getting married, having your own small business, or renting. The biggest thing I've discovered since being thrust into my current situation is that if it didn't happen, then I'd still be trying to conform to society in those ways and I'd be miserable. I was seriously unhappy trying to make things work with my daughter's mother in my 20s. I had allowed her to trap me in the relationship and this made me resentful. These days, I love my own company. But what is it that you really want? If it's not the life you currently have, then stop living how others think you should live and go after the life you truly desire. Take it from someone who did just that. It is so worth it. Viva Las Vegas. In 1993, at only 20 years of age, I managed to spend $10,000 in 10 days on a credit card in Los Angeles. That's a shit ton of money in those days, and it didn't even include the recording studio that I was rapping at in South Central LA doing some demos. 25 years later, I found myself in a similar but vastly different situation. This time I was in Las Vegas alone and still had the same cheeky curiosity as I had 25 years earlier, but I had my own money, not the bank's. I headed to the old part of Vegas, Fremont Street, where the old casinos were. I watched the incredible light show that plays every night, then went looking for a place to have dinner. I wandered into a hotel casino and took an escalator upstairs. At the top of the escalator, I noticed a narrow hallway leading to a bar. On either side of the hallway were black velvet-lined walls with approximately 30cm holes about shoulder height. The best way to describe these holes is to call them glory holes. You know, like the ones in porn movies where, well, do I really need to go into detail? Regardless, instead of knobs sticking through the holes, there were dozens of women's arms wearing black velvet gloves holding champagne flutes full to the brim. There was no one else in the hallway, so I thought I'd grab a glass of champagne and see where it led. As I got to the end of the hallway, I noticed a stunning array of fresh peeled prawns, lobster, smoked salmon and crab. A young lady handed me a serviette and I helped myself to a few king prawns before continuing to the main bar area. As I looked around the room, I noticed that most of the people there were wearing cocktail dresses and suits. In contrast, I was wearing a pair of jeans and black leather jacket. By this stage, I wasn't really sure where I was, why I was there, or if I was meant to be there. All I knew was that the prawns were delicious and the champagne kept coming. I chatted to a few people, but mostly just meandered from the bar to the seafood table. After about 30 minutes, I thought the chances of me getting discovered and possibly having to fork out for what I had ingested were increasing, so I decided to cut and run. By the time I left, I had devoured more than a dozen king prawns, 5 lobster tails and a handful of smoked salmon, plus who knows how many glasses of champagne. I was as full as a fat lady's sock and happier than a breastfeeding baby. As I stumbled to the bus stop to catch the shuttle back to the MGM Grand where I was staying, I felt satisfied that while the USA had gotten the better of me decades earlier, in a small way I did what most people fail to do: beat Vegas. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Have you ever felt like you're the only person in the world with a particular problem? Allow me to shed some light on your issue in a not so new way. Every day, songwriters sit down and pour their hearts out in what they think is a unique arrangement, only to realise that the same chord progression has been used in dozens of hits. If you don't believe me, search Axis of Awesome 4 chords on YouTube. In a similar way, a screenwriter comes up with a supposedly new story for a movie only to discover that there have been hundreds of movies with the same premise, told in a slightly different way. To show you how this is the case, when writing a logline, a one-sentence summary of what a movie's about, the formula is as such. A story about a fill-in-the-blank who must fill-in-the-blank in order to fill-in-the-blank. That's every single movie you've ever seen. 2 decades before mashups were done by everyone from Glee to Pitch Perfect, Gene Kelly and Michael Beck in the movie Xanadu melded 2 completely different song genres into the showstopper Dancin'. Just like there are a limited number of combinations of notes that can make a pop song and only 3 true genres of movies, your problems are not unique to you either. The worst thing we can do is to think that our problems or insecurities are exclusively ours. Almost everyone has the same problems and insecurities in life. Once you realise that the problems you are facing have been overcome by millions of people and that there must be a solution, then all you need to do is find it. Work out who has had the same or similar challenges in the past and use their blueprint to overcome it yourself. That's the essence of this entire book, to share how I've overcome the horrendous circumstances I've been put through in the past decade to help others. I learned how to rap as a teenager by modelling great rappers. I taught myself how to sing by mimicking John Farnham. And I learned how to write screenplays by reading great screenplays and watching the corresponding movies to see how what was on the page translated to the screen. When it came to problems in my life, I either looked for how other people had overcome them or how I had overcome them myself in the past. Your problems and your insecurities are not unique to you, and neither are the solutions to overcome them. So stop beating yourself up for having them and start looking for the simple, tried and true solutions that have helped many others. Why do we have to be against someone? Christians and Muslims, blacks and whites, gays and straights, men and women, instead of tearing each other down to make ourselves look better, why can't we lift each other up and respectfully embrace each other's diversity? I mean, if Peggy and Molly, a dog and a magpie, can become best mates and love each other, then surely we humans who have far more similarities can learn to love one another regardless of our differences. I get that some groups have been suppressed or treated badly over many years, but there is no need to continue fueling hatred towards each other. Living in the past is not going to fix the future. Regardless of what people call their faith, they are essentially all the same thing. Sure, there are extremists in any religion or race, but 99% of us are the same and believe the same things, regardless of what we want to call it. No matter the religion, the message is pretty much the same. And despite what the 1% want you to believe, they are all about peace, love, and grace. I don't give a shit if you're black, white, Asian, Muslim, gay, straight, or whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, cleaner, prostitute, or unemployed. When I look at you, no matter who or what you are or label yourself to be, you are just another human being to me. From the start of my career as an amateur and professional entertainer, I worked closely with all races, genders, and sexual preferences. We shared some wonderful times without ever judging each other based on skin colour, sexual preference, or religious beliefs. I don't understand why the media, or anyone for that matter, would need to categorise themselves or other people. We're all human. We all love, we all bleed, we all breathe, and we all have similar desires. I don't care if your skin is darker than mine, if you pray 5 times a day, if you want to have sex with the opposite sex or the same sex, or even both. We need to stop looking at one another as being different and see each other for our similarities, which are far more than our differences. As I've previously stated, fighting against something doesn't make it go away. Tearing someone down doesn't make you better. In my professional life as a singer, I never tore another performer down to make myself look better. If someone was better than me, I learnt from them and became better while encouraging them and lifting them up so we could both share in each other's successes. Hate fuels hate, but on the flip side, love breeds love. Lift each other up and look at each other not as a different race, sex, or religion, but as your fellow human being on a slightly different journey. For the most part, people believe what they see and read, so I would like to see both the media and politicians take more of an ethical approach to how they act. The problem always starts at the top and filters down. Now I bet the media dissect this book and look for all the things they want to find to discredit me in order to create hatred. But what's the bet they read this part and it never gets a mention and never leads to any type of change on their behalf?
Nurture the boy and the man will appear. Let me start by saying that this chapter is not a criticism of women. It's simply an alternative that may serve them better when it comes to making them feel safe in intimate relationships. In recent years, there has become a culture of blaming and bashing men whenever the topic of domestic violence arises. This rhetoric comes from the media as they stir up anger and hate, but unfortunately some women are lapping it up, despite most knowing better. While men are partly to blame for this heightened focus on domestic violence, the answer to solving this problem is not to put men down and thereby putting even more pressure on them, but rather the opposite. Anyone who has attended Tony Robbins' Date with Destiny seminar will attest to just how powerful his relationship day on day 6 of the event is. Throughout the day, Tony educates both men and women on what they can do better when relating to their partner. But for the sake of this story, let's stick to one side of the equation. The most powerful part of the experience was when Tony addressed the men in the room, which led to a raw and spontaneous outpouring of the purest protective masculine energy I've ever seen. As Tony stood on stage in front of 500 men, roughly half the attendees, all Tony yelled was one word. That word inspired a raw, masculine, one-word reply that nearly lifted the roof off the room. Several more times, Tony shouted, to which the men yelled back. During this outpouring of emotion, every single male in the room was completely centered and in their absolute masculine state, where men must be for a relationship to thrive. While both men and women may occasionally be in their opposite energy, e.g. men in their feminine energy and women in their masculine, for a male-female intimate relationship to thrive long-term, men must predominantly be in their masculine energy and women in their feminine. When Tony went around the room asking various women how they felt after witnessing the masculine response to Tony's war cry, each woman emotionally stated that she felt safe, protected, and like every man in the room would die for her. Just to backtrack a little, Tony began this segment of the day by showing William Wallace's freedom speech from the movie Braveheart, before explaining to women that it is a man's natural instinct to be free. He explained that if a woman makes a man feel controlled, criticised, or closed, the man will shut down or want to escape the relationship either emotionally or physically. Tony explained that when a woman allows her partner to be free, it is his natural instinct to honour that and protect her.
While it may seem contradictory, it is only when a man feels totally free that he willingly gives himself to his partner. Now, when he does this, you had better believe that this man will do anything to protect her, including die for her. This all stems back to a man's relationship with his mother. The love a mother gives is a love like no other, for it is through the mother's nurturing of the boy that the man eventually appears. Even when a male grows into a fully formed man, inside him remains that boy whose love for the women around him is unflinching. To get to the point of this chapter, Tony believes, and I wholeheartedly agree, that if a woman wants to get the best out of her man, she must nurture the boy inside him. I'm not suggesting she treats him like a kid, but rather that she remembers that no matter how strong, tough, or seemingly unbreakable he is, that little boy will always be there wanting to protect and honour the women in his life. Women have an incredibly nurturing nature that men lack, and it's this gift that women possess that is essential for a male-female relationship to thrive. By lifting him up rather than putting him down, the man will emerge and his natural masculine essence to honour and protect will surface. In a time when the world needs men to stand up to reduce domestic violence, my advice to women is this: instead of trying to suppress men by putting them down, why not try lifting them up and watch how they stand up and become better men that will protect and serve you the way God intended? Put simply, nurture the boy and the man will appear. Being chosen is a gift. Throughout my life, I've always known that I was adopted by my grandparents. My biological mother and I have shared a special bond as brother-sister/mother-son, and for the most part, this has been hassle-free. Yet on occasions in my own head, I've had many unanswered questions. Like most adopted people, the feelings of abandonment were front and centre, and in hindsight, this somewhat dictated how I approached romantic relationships up until recently. I mean, my parents weren't really my parents, so how did I know if they truly loved me? This was something that simmered on an unconscious level until May 2016, when I spent my last $7,000 at Tony Robbins' Date with Destiny event. About 9 hours into the first day, a lady stood and said that she was adopted and that she blamed her biological mother for how messed up her life was. Tony explained that her blockage was a result of her not blaming correctly. He suggested that if she was going to blame her mother for all the bad shit, then she must blame her for all of the good stuff too. This hit home for me. I blamed Sue for many things, but I didn't blame her for the wonderful life that her parents gave me as a direct result of the choice that Sue had made all those years ago. You see, if you're going to blame, you need to blame properly. I used to blame Brianna's family for her death, but now I blame them for being the reason Brianna was such an incredible young lady. I now blame them for this wonderful opportunity I have to help others and hopefully save lives. I blame them for pushing Brianna right into my arms so that we could have such a beautiful love, even if it was only for a short time. Tony explained to the lady at the event that her adopted parents did not have to love her. They chose to love her. A biological mother has to love her child, even if it looks like a monkey. But a complete stranger has no chemical ties to that child. So for a stranger to love a child is even more special. God knows my grandparents could have put their feet up and enjoyed retirement, but instead they chose to love me and raise me as their own. Any person who adopts or fosters a child chooses to love them. And that evening with Tony Robbins made me realise that the love that I had been given was a greater gift than most children receive. To comprehend that I was not abandoned, but rather I was chosen, was life-altering. Not only did I discover this incredible fact, but in doing so, I realised the power of one's perception in life. These days, no matter what happens to me, including being charged with murder, I look at the situation and make sure I'm perceiving it in the best way possible. Everything in life is a gift, and every single thing that happens to you is an example of life happening for you, not to you. The path to forgiveness starts with you. The term forgiveness is one that I wasn't comfortable with until recently. As much as I love Brianna, when I moved through the various stages of grief, I seemed to stall at the angry/resentment stage. I was angry at Brianna for committing suicide and for putting me through this pain. I was also angry at her mother for treating Brianna so badly in the months leading up to her death. But most of all, I was angry at myself. I was angry for not seeing the signs of depression or for taking Brianna's threats to throw herself off the balcony more seriously. I was angry for not being able to save her, and yes, I was angry for that stupid text message that I sent to her only minutes before she ended her life. I know that that text message was in no way responsible for her decision that night, but that is one moment in time that I do wish I could relive. I always wanted Brianna and her mother to reconcile, and I tried so hard for Brianna not to move out of her mother's house months earlier. But for all the gentleness that Brianna possessed, she was a surprisingly strong-willed young woman. These are the reasons why I stalled in the anger stage, but now they've become the greatest gift that I've gained from this experience. For years I searched for the strength to forgive the police and the coroner for how they had not completed simple tasks which should have cleared my name, or how the media and Brianna's family had misled the public in one way or another. While I would like to think that I had forgiven them all by early 2019, to be honest, it wasn't until the shit really hit the fan when I was charged with murder that I was able to understand why I could forgive them all properly. I didn't become free when I walked from the watch house on bail or when I was acquitted. I became free when I forgave myself, Brianna, and all of those who had done wrong by me. Some people have all the physical freedom the world offers, yet they are prisoners in more ways than someone who is in custody. They say that the truth will set you free, but I've learnt beyond a shadow of a doubt that even more than the truth, it is forgiveness that sets you free. It's like a line in my movie, Through the Eyes of Love, where the female love interest says to the protagonist, "The only thing worse than being blind is having sight with no vision." The line, which is a play on the famous Helen Keller quote, is the turning point for the protagonist to change his ways, and is one that has also helped me to turn my life around. We all make mistakes, and while it's one thing not to make them or to learn from them, it is equally important for us to forgive ourselves for them. As Dr. John DeMartini says, no matter what you have done or haven't done, you are worthy of love.